In a city where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and streets buzzed with life, there lived a woman who had spent her entire career trying to make things better. She wasn't flashy or loud. She didn't have to be. Her name was Lieutenant Ava Johnson, and she carried herself with quiet strength that commanded respect without demanding it. People often said she had the kind of presence you couldn't ignore, a mix of wisdom, patience, and an unshakable sense of fairness. Ava grew up in this very city, surrounded by its energy, but also acutely aware of its struggles. Crime rates were high, trust between communities and police officers was low, and racial tensions simmered just beneath the surface. From a young age, she knew she wanted to help fix these problems, not from the outside looking in, but as someone willing to step into the chaos and work from within. So after finishing college, she joined the police force. For over 20 years, Ava served on the front lines. She walked the beat, investigated cases, led teams, and eventually climbed the ranks. Along the way, she earned a reputation for being tough, but fair. If you broke the law, she'd hold you accountable. But if you needed guidance, she'd offer a hand. Colleagues admired her leadership, and community members appreciated her empathy. She wasn't perfect. No one is. But she tried every single day to leave the world a little better than she found it. Now, something big was about to happen. The mayor's office had decided it was time for a change at the top of the police department. After months of deliberation, they chose Ava to become the new police chief. It was a historic appointment, the first black woman to hold the position in the city's history. But here's the thing. The news hadn't gone public yet. Only a handful of people inside the department knew, and even fewer outside. Ava preferred it that way. She didn't want fanfare or attention. She just wanted to get to work. On her first official day as police chief-elect, Ava decided to start small. Instead of holding press conferences or meeting with politicians, she chose to visit a local courthouse. There was a hearing scheduled that morning involving complaints against officers accused of using excessive force during arrests. As someone committed to reforming policing practices, Ava thought it would be valuable to listen firsthand to what people were saying. Maybe she could learn something that would guide her decisions moving forward. Dressed in plain clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, and a light jacket, Ava slipped into the back row of the courtroom unnoticed. She brought along a notepad and pen, ready to jot down observations. The room was packed with lawyers, reporters, and concerned citizens. No one paid much attention to the middle-aged black woman sitting quietly near the exit. To them, she looked like any other spectator, perhaps a family member of one of the parties involved, or maybe someone curious about the case. As the proceedings began, Ava leaned forward slightly, focusing intently on the conversations unfolding before her. Lawyers argued passionately, witnesses recounted their experiences, and judges asked pointed questions. The atmosphere was tense, charged with emotion. For Ava, it felt like stepping into the heart of the issues she hoped to tackle as police chief. Each testimony painted a picture of frustration, fear, and mistrust, emotions she understood all too well. Little did she know, however, that this seemingly ordinary morning would take a dramatic turn. Somewhere in the courtroom sat a man whose actions would test everything Ava stood for, and reveal just how far some people still needed to go when it came to treating others with dignity and respect. What happened next would shock everyone present, including Ava herself. But more importantly, it would set the stage for a pivotal moment in her journey toward creating real change. The courtroom was tense, the kind of tension that made the air feel heavy and everyone's nerves stand on edge. At the center of it all sat Officer Derek Monroe, a man whose reputation preceded him. He wasn't just any officer. He was known for his short temper, aggressive tactics, and a history of complaints filed against him. Today, he was testifying in a case where citizens accused him of using excessive force during arrests. The accusations were serious, and the room buzzed with anticipation as he took the stand. Derek started off calmly enough, answering questions from his lawyer about the specific incidents in question. But as the opposing counsel began pressing him, things quickly escalated. His tone grew sharper, his words more defensive. He talked about how criminals always tried to twist the truth to avoid accountability, how they played the victim when they were the ones breaking the law. It was clear he saw himself as the good guy, a protector of order in a chaotic world. But the way he spoke carried an undertone of anger, almost resentment toward those who dared challenge him. As Derek continued, his voice rose louder, drawing more attention. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing something brewing beneath the surface. Then came the moment no one expected. Mid-sentence, Derek paused and scanned the room. His eyes landed on Ava, sitting quietly in the back row. She hadn't said a word, hadn't done anything to draw attention to herself. Yet something about her presence seemed to trigger him. "See?" Derek snapped suddenly, pointing directly at Ava. His finger jabbed through the air like an accusation. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. People like her. They come here thinking they can undermine us because we're doing our jobs." His voice dripped with disdain, and the entire room went silent. Everyone turned to look at Ava, trying to figure out why she had become the target of his outburst. Ava froze for a split second, caught off guard by the sudden attack. But then she did what she always did in moments of conflict. She stayed calm. She didn't flinch or react visibly, though inside, her mind raced. What had she done to provoke this? Why was he singling her out? Before she could process it further, Derek stormed down from the witness stand, heading straight toward her. The crowd gasped collectively as Derek approached Ava, his face red with fury. Without hesitation, he leaned over and shoved her chair backward. It wasn't a violent push, but it was forceful enough to make her stumble slightly. Shock rippled through the room as people exchanged horrified glances. No one moved at first. They were too stunned to react. Then chaos erupted. Security guards rushed forward, shouting for Derek to stop. Spectators jumped to their feet, some yelling in outrage while others scrambled to get out of the way. Reporters furiously scribbled notes or grabbed their phones to record the scene unfolding before them. Amidst the commotion, Ava steadied herself, gripping the edge of her chair tightly. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain composed. This was not the time to lose control. As security finally managed to restrain Derek, pulling him away from Ava, the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. All eyes were now on Ava, waiting to see how she would respond. Would she lash out? Call for immediate consequences? Instead, she took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and looked Derek squarely in the eye. "I'm Lieutenant Ava Johnson," she said, her voice steady and clear, despite the shock still coursing through her veins. "And I am your new police chief." The words hit like a thunderclap. For a moment, no one spoke. Derek froze mid-protest, his face going pale as realization dawned on him. The weight of what he had just done crashed down around him. Here he was ranting and raving about criminals and undermining authority, only to realize he had attacked the very person now in charge of holding him accountable. The irony was almost unbearable. Whispers spread like wildfire throughout the courtroom. People stared at Ava in disbelief, piecing together the magnitude of the situation. Cameras flashed, capturing every second of the drama. Reporters jotted down frantic notes, knowing they had stumbled upon a story that would dominate headlines for days to come. Meanwhile, Ava stood there, grounded and resolute. Despite everything, she refused to let fear or anger dictate her actions. For Derek, the reality of his mistake sank in slowly. He stammered, trying to explain himself, but his words came out disjointed and hollow. The confidence he had displayed earlier evaporated, replaced by panic. He glanced around the room, searching for support but found none. Even his own lawyer avoided making eye contact, clearly aware of how badly things had gone wrong. As the guards escorted Derek out of the courtroom, the tension lingered. Ava watched him go, her expression unreadable. Inside, emotions swirled: anger, frustration, disbelief. But she pushed them aside. This wasn't just about her. It was about sending a message. If she wanted to lead real change within the police department, she couldn't afford to let moments like this derail her focus. Instead, she vowed to use this incident as fuel for the work ahead. When the judge called for a recess, Ava remained seated, gathering her thoughts. Around her, people hesitated, unsure whether to approach her or give her space. Some whispered apologies. Others offered words of encouragement. But Ava didn't need validation. She already knew what she had to do next. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. As Derek was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the room remained eerily silent. People exchanged glances, unsure of what to say or do next. The gravity of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. For a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. Then slowly, the murmurs began, soft at first, then growing louder as everyone tried to process the scene they had just witnessed. Ava stood there, still holding on to her chair for support. Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly steadied herself. She took a deep breath, letting the chaos around her settle before speaking again. This wasn't just about her. It was about sending a message. It was about showing people that even someone in her position wasn't immune to the kind of treatment many others had endured silently for years. And now, with all eyes on her, she knew this was an opportunity to set things right. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged by someone like Derek. One of the bailiffs approached her cautiously, his face etched with concern. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry this happened," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Ava shook her head gently, offering him a small smile. "I'm fine," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "Thank you for asking." The bailiff hesitated for a second, clearly torn between professionalism and disbelief. Finally, he blurted out, Did he really not know who you are?" Ava nodded, her expression unreadable. "Apparently not," she said simply, leaving the rest unsaid. The bailiff stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. Word spread quickly among the courthouse staff, and soon, everyone seemed to be whispering about the incident. Meanwhile, reporters were already scrambling to get their cameras ready. Phones flashed as journalists captured every detail. The stunned faces of spectators, the tension in the air, and most importantly, Ava's quiet dignity in the face of such blatant disrespect. One bold reporter pushed through the crowd and called out, "Lieutenant Johnson, or should we say Chief Johnson, can you comment on what just happened here?" Ava turned toward the reporter, her gaze steady. She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the room, "and what happened today is unacceptable. No one deserves to be treated that way, regardless of who they are or where they come from. As your new police chief, I will ensure that incidents like this are addressed swiftly and fairly. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a system where everyone feels safe and respected." Her words sent ripples through the room. Some people nodded in agreement, while others clapped softly, careful not to draw too much attention to themselves. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Within minutes, the story was live online, spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated. Social media erupted with reactions, some outraged, others supportive, but all united by one common thread: shock. Outside the courthouse, news vans began arriving, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like antennas searching for signals. Protesters gathered almost instantly, holding signs that read, "Justice for all and accountability now." They chanted slogans, demanding answers and action. Many expressed solidarity with Ava, saying her experience was a reflection of what countless others had faced but never reported. For Ava, the whirlwind of attention was overwhelming, but she refused to let it distract her. She understood the significance of the moment. This wasn't just about punishing Derek. It was about addressing the deeper issues within the police department. Racism, bias, and abuse of power weren't isolated problems. They were systemic. And if she wanted to make lasting change, she needed to tackle them head-on. Back inside the courthouse, the judge reconvened the hearing after a brief recess. With Derek removed from the premises, the focus shifted back to the case at hand. But no one could ignore the elephant in the room. Lawyers whispered urgently to their clients, judges conferred quietly with clerks, and spectators leaned in to discuss what they had just seen. The atmosphere was charged, electric with emotion. Later that day, Ava returned to police headquarters. News of the incident had reached the department long before she arrived, and officers buzzed with nervous energy. Some avoided eye contact, embarrassed by the behavior of one of their own. Others approached her cautiously, offering apologies or expressions of support. "Chief," one officer said hesitantly, "we're sorry this happened. You didn't deserve that." Ava thanked him but reminded him that the issue went beyond personal grievances. "This isn't about me," she told him. "It's about making sure something like this never happens again to anyone." Behind closed doors, Ava met with senior officials to discuss next steps. She wasted no time launching an independent investigation into Derek's conduct, not just his actions in the courtroom, but his entire history of complaints and alleged misconduct. She also announced plans to implement sweeping reforms within the department, starting with mandatory anti-bias training for all officers. Additionally, she proposed the creation of a citizen oversight board, a group of community members tasked with reviewing cases of alleged misconduct and ensuring accountability. Word of these initiatives spread quickly, earning praise from advocacy groups and concerned citizens alike. Many saw Ava's response as a sign of hope, a promise that real change was possible. But not everyone was pleased. Some officers grumbled about the changes, arguing that they were unnecessary or overly harsh. Others defended Derek, claiming his actions were out of character and fueled by stress. Still, Ava remained steadfast. She knew that meaningful progress often came with resistance, and she was prepared to face it head-on. That evening, Ava sat alone in her office, staring out the window at the city skyline. The events of the day replayed in her mind over and over again. She thought about Derek's rage, the shocked faces in the courtroom, the protesters chanting outside. Most of all, she thought about the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. Becoming police chief wasn't just a promotion, it was a calling. And if she wanted to honor that calling, she couldn't afford to lose sight of why she had joined the force in the first place: to protect and serve. As exhaustion crept in, Ava allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She thought about the fear she had felt when Derek shoved her chair, the anger that had bubbled up inside her, and the resolve that had ultimately taken over. She reminded herself that leadership wasn't about being fearless. It was about finding courage in the face of fear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, she let herself rest, knowing she had taken the first step toward building a better future. The fallout from the courtroom incident spread like wildfire, igniting conversations far beyond the walls of the courthouse. By the next morning, newspapers and news channels across the country were buzzing with headlines about what had happened. "Racist cop attacks incoming police chief" was splashed across front pages, accompanied by photos of Derek being led away in handcuffs and Ava standing tall despite the shock. Social media exploded too, with hashtags like "Justice for Ava" trending nationwide. People shared their outrage, their support, and their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement. For Derek, life moved fast, and not in a good way. Once stripped of his badge and placed on administrative leave pending investigation, he became a pariah within the department. Officers who once laughed at his jokes or backed him up during tense situations now avoided him altogether. Some whispered behind his back, calling him reckless and selfish for jeopardizing the reputation of the entire force. Others simply stayed silent, unsure of how to react but knowing full well that Derek's actions reflected poorly on all of them. Outside the department, Derek faced even harsher consequences. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters daily, holding signs that read "No more racism" and "Hold him accountable." Community leaders spoke out, demanding justice not just for Ava, but for everyone who had suffered under similar circumstances. For days, Derek's face dominated the news cycle, a symbol of everything wrong with policing in America. The pressure mounted, and it showed. Friends said Derek looked like a broken man, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if expecting judgment from every corner. Meanwhile, Ava found herself thrust into the national spotlight. Reporters camped outside her home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had become an overnight icon of resilience and reform. Invitations poured in, from talk shows, advocacy groups, and even politicians eager to align themselves with her cause. But Ava wasn't interested in fame or glory. She turned down most interviews, focusing instead on the work ahead. Her priority wasn't making headlines. It was fixing the system that had allowed someone like Derek to operate unchecked for so long. Inside police headquarters, Ava wasted no time addressing the scandal head-on. She called an emergency meeting with senior officials, laying out her vision for accountability and transparency. "We can't keep sweeping these issues under the rug," she told them firmly. "If we want to rebuild trust with our community, we need to start by holding ourselves accountable. That means investigating every complaint thoroughly, disciplining misconduct consistently, and creating spaces where people feel safe reporting wrongdoing." To ensure fairness, Ava brought in an independent review board made up of legal experts, civil rights advocates, and community members. Their job was simple yet monumental: examine Derek's case alongside other unresolved complaints against officers and recommend appropriate actions. This move sent shockwaves through the department. While some applauded Ava's commitment to justice, others bristled at the idea of outsiders scrutinizing their work. Whispers of resistance echoed through the halls, but Ava stood firm. She knew change wouldn't come without pushback, and she was ready to face it. In addition to the investigation, Ava introduced sweeping reforms aimed at preventing future incidents. Mandatory anti-bias training became a cornerstone of her strategy, requiring all officers, veterans and rookies alike, to attend workshops designed to challenge stereotypes and foster empathy. She also implemented body cameras for every officer, ensuring that interactions with the public could be reviewed objectively. To further bridge the gap between police and the communities they served, Ava launched monthly town hall meetings where residents could voice concerns directly to department leaders. These changes didn't sit well with everyone. Some officers grumbled about the extra workload, claiming the reforms were unnecessary or overly punitive. A few even threatened to quit, arguing that the department was becoming too soft. But Ava refused to back down. She reminded doubters that policing wasn't just about enforcing laws, it was about serving people. "If we lose sight of that mission," she told one skeptical officer during a heated exchange, "then we've failed. Not just as cops, but as human beings." As weeks turned into months, progress began to show. Complaints against officers dropped significantly, thanks in part to increased oversight and better communication between police and citizens. At the same time, morale within the department started to improve. Officers who initially resisted the changes gradually warmed to them, realizing that accountability wasn't a punishment. It was a path toward earning respect. Community relations improved too, with residents expressing cautious optimism about the direction things were heading. Derek's trial finally arrived, drawing massive crowds both inside and outside the courthouse. Prosecutors painted a damning picture of a man whose prejudice and recklessness had gone unchecked for years. Witnesses testified about past encounters with Derek, describing incidents of verbal abuse, racial slurs, and unwarranted aggression. Defense lawyers argued that Derek's behavior was out of character, blaming stress and poor decision-making rather than inherent bigotry. But the evidence spoke for itself, and after days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. When the judge announced Derek's sentence, several years in prison followed by mandatory counseling, the courtroom erupted in applause. Outside, protesters cheered, waving signs that read "Victory for Justice." For many, this was more than just a win for Ava. It was a victory for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of systemic injustice. Back at headquarters, Ava watched the news coverage quietly, her expression thoughtful. She knew this moment was significant, but she also understood it was just one step in a much longer journey. Holding Derek accountable was important, but true reform required sustained effort. It meant continuing to listen, learn, and adapt. It meant staying vigilant when others grew complacent. And above all, it meant remembering why she had chosen this path in the first place: to make the world safer and fairer for everyone. That night, Ava sat alone in her office, reflecting on how far she'd come since that chaotic day in the courtroom. She thought about the challenges ahead, the battles still left to fight. But she also thought about the progress they'd already made. The lives touched, the trust rebuilt, the hope rekindled. As she turned off the lights and locked the door, behind her she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new hurdles, new opportunities to lead. And she was ready. This expanded version delves deeper into the aftermath of the courtroom incident, exploring the reactions of key players, the broader societal impact, and the steps taken toward meaningful reform. It balances emotion with action, keeping the narrative engaging and relatable while maintaining a natural tone. Let me know if you'd like similar expansions for the remaining parts. Months had passed since the courtroom incident, and the city was beginning to feel different. Not perfect, far from it, but there was a shift in the air, a sense that change was possible. Ava's reforms were starting to take root, and while progress wasn't always smooth or fast, it was undeniable. The police department, once seen as a fortress of secrecy and resistance, was slowly transforming into something more open, more accountable. People noticed. Conversations at bus stops, coffee shops, and community meetings began to reflect cautious optimism. For the first time in years, many residents felt like their voices mattered. Derek's sentencing marked a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire city. His conviction sent a clear message. No one was above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. It also gave Ava a platform to push harder for the changes she believed in. She didn't stop after Derek's trial. If anything, she worked even harder. Every day brought new challenges, new battles to fight. But Ava approached them with the same quiet determination that had defined her career. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she refused to lose sight of the bigger picture. One of the most significant changes Ava implemented was the creation of a citizen oversight board. Made up of local leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens, the board acted as a bridge between the police department and the community. Its members reviewed complaints against officers, monitored ongoing investigations, and provided recommendations for policy improvements. At first, some officers resisted, seeing the board as a threat to their autonomy. But over time, they came to understand its value. Having an outside perspective helped identify blind spots and fostered trust with residents who had long felt ignored. Ava also prioritized diversity within the department. She launched recruitment campaigns targeting underrepresented groups, ensuring that the force reflected the community it served. Training programs were revamped to emphasize empathy, communication skills, and conflict resolution. Officers learned how to de-escalate tense situations without resorting to force, a skill that proved invaluable in reducing violent encounters. These efforts paid off quickly. Complaints about misconduct dropped significantly, and surveys showed growing satisfaction among residents when it came to interactions with police. But perhaps the most impactful initiative was the monthly town hall meetings Ava introduced. Held in different neighborhoods across the city, these gatherings gave people a chance to speak directly to police leadership. Residents shared their concerns, frustrations, and hopes for the future. Some vented about past injustices, while others offered constructive feedback on how to improve relations. Ava listened intently, taking notes and promising action where needed. These meetings weren't just about addressing grievances. They were about building connections, fostering understanding, and reminding everyone that they were part of the same community. The impact of these changes rippled outward. Crime rates began to decline, thanks in part to better collaboration between police and residents. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up, working hand in hand with officers to keep streets safe. Schools partnered with the department to host workshops on conflict, resolution, and civic responsibility. Even small gestures like officers attending block parties or coaching youth sports teams helped humanize the badge and break down barriers. For Ava, the transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. She spent countless hours meeting with victims of police misconduct, listening to their stories and apologizing on behalf of the department. "We failed you," she told one woman whose son had been wrongfully arrested, "but we're going to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen again." Her sincerity touched hearts and opened doors that had long been closed. Many who had once distrusted the police began to see them in a new light, not as adversaries but as partners in creating a safer, fairer world. Of course, not everyone supported Ava's efforts. Critics argued that her reforms went too far, accusing her of weakening the department's ability to enforce laws effectively. Some politicians tried to undermine her initiatives, fearing backlash from powerful unions or interest groups. Online, trolls attacked her relentlessly, spreading misinformation and hate. But Ava refused to let negativity derail her mission. She leaned on her team, her faith, and the knowledge that she was doing the right thing. "There will always be people who resist change," she told a young officer during a particularly tough week. "But remember why we're here. We're not just enforcing laws, we're protecting lives. And sometimes protecting lives means changing the way we do things." As years passed, Ava's influence extended beyond her city. Other departments across the country looked to her as a model for reform, adopting similar policies and practices. Conferences invited her to speak, sharing her story with audiences eager to learn how to create meaningful change. Awards and accolades followed, though Ava accepted them humbly, always redirecting praise to her team and the community. "This isn't about me," she often said. "It's about all of us working together." Yet despite the recognition, Ava remained grounded. She still walked the streets of her city, stopping to chat with shopkeepers, parents, and kids playing basketball. She attended funerals for fallen officers and victims of violence alike, grieving alongside families and vowing to prevent future tragedies. She never forgot where she came from, or why she had chosen this path in the first place. Looking back, Ava saw how far they'd come. The courtroom incident that had once seemed like a personal attack had become a catalyst for systemic change. It reminded her that setbacks could spark breakthroughs, that pain could lead to purpose. She thought about Derek, now serving his sentence, and wondered if he understood the magnitude of what he had done, not just to her, but to the movement for justice and equality. She hoped he did, because redemption was always possible. On her final day as police chief, Ava stood before a crowd of colleagues, community members, and reporters. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, not from fear, but from emotion. "Change isn't easy," she said, scanning the faces of those gathered. "It takes courage, patience, and persistence. But I've seen what's possible when we choose to listen, to learn, and to act. Together, we've made this city stronger, fairer, and more united than ever before." Years had passed since that fateful day in the courtroom, and Ava's legacy continued to shape not only her city, but also the broader conversation about policing and justice. Though she had retired from her position as police chief, her influence lingered like a ripple spreading across water, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. People often spoke of her not just as a leader, but as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of one person to spark meaningful change. Ava's retirement ceremony was a heartfelt event, attended by hundreds of people who wanted to thank her for everything she had done. Officers she had mentored stood side by side with community members whose lives she had touched. There were speeches filled with gratitude, laughter, and even tears. One young officer, barely 2 years into his career, summed it up perfectly when he said, "She taught us that being a cop isn't just about wearing a badge, it's about carrying a responsibility. She showed us how to be better." After stepping down, Ava didn't disappear from public life entirely. Instead, she shifted her focus to mentoring the next generation of leaders. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, universities, and community centers. Her talks weren't flashy or overly polished. They were raw, honest, and deeply personal. She shared stories from her own journey, the struggles, the victories, and the lessons learned along the way. Audiences hung on her every word, inspired by her humility and wisdom. One of her favorite topics to discuss was the importance of listening. "Change doesn't start with big gestures," she often said. "It starts with small moments, like sitting down with someone who disagrees with you and truly hearing them out. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but that's where growth happens." She encouraged others to approach challenges with empathy and patience, reminding them that real progress took time. In addition to speaking engagements, Ava wrote a memoir, chronicling her experiences in law enforcement and the reforms she championed. The book became an instant bestseller, praised for its authenticity and insight. Readers connected with her storytelling, finding comfort in her belief that even the Hardest battles could be won if approached with courage and compassion. Proceeds from the book went toward scholarships for underprivileged youth pursuing careers in public service, a cause close to Ava's heart. Back in her hometown, reminders of Ava's impact were everywhere. Statues and plaques honored her contributions, and schools named after her became hubs of learning and activism. Young students proudly wore T-shirts emblazoned with quotes from her speeches, such as, "Justice begins with kindness." These tributes weren't just symbols of admiration. They represented a promise to carry forward the values she embodied. The police department itself underwent a renaissance under her successors, who built upon the foundation she had laid. New recruits entered the force with a deeper understanding of their role in society, not just as enforcers of laws but as guardians of peace and equity. Training programs evolved further, incorporating cutting-edge techniques in conflict resolution and cultural competency. Complaints against officers continued to decline, while trust between police and residents reached levels not seen in decades. But perhaps the most profound testament to Ava's legacy was the way people began to see themselves differently. Communities, once divided by fear and mistrust, started working together to solve problems. Neighbors organized cleanup drives, planted trees, and created safe spaces for children to play. Business owners collaborated with local leaders to revitalize struggling areas. Even former skeptics admitted that things felt lighter. There was still work to be done, of course, but there was also a renewed sense of possibility. For Ava, retirement offered a chance to reflect on her journey. She spent her days gardening, reading, and spending time with family. Yet, she never lost sight of the issues that mattered most to her. She stayed involved in advocacy efforts, lending her voice to campaigns focused on criminal justice reform and racial equity. When protests erupted in other cities over incidents of police brutality, Ava joined marches alongside younger activists, showing solidarity and offering guidance. She believed strongly in passing the torch, ensuring that the fight for justice would continue long after she was gone. On quiet evenings, Ava often sat on her porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. She thought about all she had witnessed, the highs and lows, the triumphs and heartbreaks. She remembered the courtroom, incident vivid, clearer than ever. Not because of the pain it caused, but because of the opportunities it created. That moment had been a turning point, forcing her to confront hard truths and inspiring her to take bold action. Reflecting on Derek, she felt no bitterness. Instead, she hoped he had used his time in prison to reflect on his actions and grow as a person. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was always possible. In fact, she liked to think of him as part of her story too, not as the villain, but as a reminder of why change was so desperately needed. As the years rolled on, Ava grew older, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. Friends joked that she was unstoppable, always finding new ways to make a difference. And though her pace slowed with age, her determination never wavered. She often told people, "You don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You just have to care enough to try." When Ava passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire city mourned. Flags flew at half-mast, and vigils were held in her honor. Social media flooded with tributes from strangers who had been touched by her story. But more than anything, people celebrated her life by continuing the work she had started. They planted gardens in her name, launched initiatives to support marginalized communities, and vowed to keep pushing for a fairer, kinder world. Decades later, Ava's name remained synonymous with courage and transformation. Textbooks included chapters about her leadership, museums featured exhibits dedicated to her reforms, and documentaries told her story to new generations. But her true legacy lived on in the hearts of those she had inspired, the teachers, activists, officers, and everyday citizens who carried her vision forward. Her final words, written in a letter found after her passing, captured the essence of her philosophy. Change is hard, and it takes time. But don't let that stop you. Start small, stay steady, and trust that every step matters. Justice isn't something we achieve overnight. It's something we build together brick by brick. Never forget that your voice, your actions, your love can move mountains. And so, Ava's story became more than history, it became a call to action, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, ordinary people could do extraordinary things. Her journey proved that while racism and injustice might cast long shadows, light always finds a way through. All it takes is one brave soul to stand tall, speak up, and lead the way.